Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, live show number 383. I am your host, Lauren Gray. Thank you for the privilege of your time early on to join us both if you're joining us live and if you're listening to us in a recorded fashion like we tend to do through the course of the 7 days up to our next show. We do this every week. Then appreciate your time listening to us as we go through our today's topic. Speaking of which, if you're watching us on TV, I am a big screen TV face for radio, I should say, or at least with the podcast, it goes that way. But I hope the topics are worthy of your consideration today. Our topic today I picked because of constant dialogue I have both with clients, people in the industry, just general. I had made a comment about someone's request on my schedule recently about the difficulty of finding a time that we could talk. And then when we finally did talk, I said, I apologize. I said, this time of year goes one of two ways. When it comes to client engagement communications and so forth. One is it's hard to find anybody because it's holiday period and there's the other demands in our life cycle of parties and or last minute travel and or family or whatever it is. And people begin to do those chunks of saved up personal time. And this gets into a scattering of basically people already mentally looking at the holidays and business wise thinking of next year, fiscal year. And so I said that one thing's to happen. One is I can't get a hold of anybody to get anything done. Or the reverse of it is it's a fire hose of everybody needs it done yesterday. There's too much needs to get done. There's still stuff left over. We're running out of time. Get it done. Get it done. The latter is what's happening right now for us in our world. With business beginning to have a semblance of normalcy, our fatigue of the things that we've been dealing with for these past few years, and so forth and so on, a very much sense of urgency from our marketing side of maximizing our full opportunity this year. And so there's so many things that are trying to be done this year while in the year, which brings us to our topic because decisions get made quite quickly. And we'll talk a little bit more about the motivations of this. But our topic today is Dear Diary, how current journaling solves future questions. It's a play on the idea that we do not do enough remembering of what we do. I'm constantly talking with clients and people in the industry, as I said, that the first premise of the hi hello is crazy week, right? Oh wow, this is that, or whoo, just too much to do, can't do this, or can only do this little piece of time, or can you move it 15 minutes so I can get off the other call? We're not allowing back to back gapping where you at least go to the bathroom and get a cup of coffee or something. It's like, okay, as soon as I get off that call, I'm on the other call. Sometimes you actually dual call. We all kind of double up where we know this call is going through the pleasantries of startup, and we're doing wrap up on this one over here. So I can get it fired up so it looks like I'm on time, even though if somebody asked me a question, I probably wouldn't even notice. That happens. The reality of that is it's hard to do our best work when our first filter is how fast can we get it off our plate. We're faced with that. I have that discussion with properties. I have that discussion with people above those properties at corporate. I have those discussions with people that run our industry. I have the privilege of knowing a lot of people in different strata, and all of them have that similarity of right now, it's more about how fast can I create, and it's not that they don't want an accurate or complete or comprehensive, but the first filter that goes to the decision process is how fast can we create a solution, which means that if you don't fix it right for the first time, you'll fix it twice thereafter. Putting bubblegum on something versus the repair that it should take only means you have to come back to it and spend twice as much time. What's that old measure twice, cut once. That's it. Be certain of what you're doing. Well, that takes time that we do not have because we're still dealing with labor shortage at certain levels, skill level at certain levels. And companies that have tightened up their financial belts, they're looking to do as much yieldability of revenue compared to cost as possible. So as I had the discussion with one client at a property level, there used to be 5 people sitting in this office. The sales numbers just went up, and I'm the only one that can fulfill them. So from their perspective, as accurate it is or isn't as they are doing 5 people's worth of work in the sense of revenue generation. There's not 5 people in the room. There's only one. And anything that's being asked is added to that list of already overwhelmed feeling that they have. That high RPM that goes on, we even have it in our culture where if we excel, okay, and our boss now puts that as a new baseline. If we over rev ourselves, overwork ourselves, that's the new base. We're as good as our last effort. That's our new benchmark. And so we don't trust those above us. So we sandbag. Salespeople metaphorically do it in the way that they know they could probably generate more business, but they're not going to declare that. They're going to declare a lesser number, because in contrast to that conversation, ownership, which knows there might be sandbagging or whatever, also don't want to pay the bonuses that are the incentives to drive more business. So it's a dance of communication. Oh, well, we want you to do this much. Well, I don't think I can. This is all I can do. Hoping to drag that number down enough that falls into the range of what they know they can accomplish so they can hit their budget goals or their bonus goals. By the same token, ownership wants to put it just past that line. Heck, our very culture of retail and business is based on packaging that doesn't include all the things that people want to buy at that level, purposely, that makes them buy the next level. It's one of the most frustrating things I see about agencies is they offer these services. Here's our beautiful catalog of everything that we do. Our basic relationship includes just these things, which are always missing the 1, 2, or 3 things that really need to be added to that list. So to be a nice, I was like, well, that's great. That's everything I need at that level. No, it's almost everything I need at that level. And now I have to buy more than what I need to get all that I needed from before. We do it in our pricing. We do it in our modeling. The very reason why we have premium or gold and platinum and versus silver and bronze and whatever is because we are upselling anything that we do with people, which is why I built the structure I have for my client. It's based on time and cost, but I'm not here to pitch what we do. I avoid that because to me, it's like you get what you need and that's all you need to pay for. All too often places are built on this structure. So because of that, we make very quick decisions. Going back to this time constraint, high volume, always, revving ourselves, overextending ourselves, over committing ourselves, working more. And even when we're not, quote, working, work is in our minds. The weekend is not a weekend of total unplug and I don't care what's going on in the world. It's instead thinking of all the stuff that you could possibly be doing to shave off some of the workload that you'll be facing on come Monday or come whenever the next day you're going to work. That's not time away. That's just different RPMs to the process. For that reason, a lot of times with the filter of how fast to get off my plate, we make decisions on things. Now, the show is about hospitality marketing, so let me bring this full circle to why we're here when we say Dear Diary, how current journaling solves future questions. We don't record what we do in the sense that we rely on our memory, okay? With Thanksgiving, we were looking at a really soft Thanksgiving weekend, so we decided to do this campaign, that campaign, this campaign. Great, did it. Whatever the results were, good or bad or whatever, that was done. But only the people that were involved in that dialogue and that decision and that execution are aware of that entire process. And so you run the risk as a business that next Thanksgiving, if those same people aren't in place, all the money you spent to have that function and that resource and that talent and do what they did this year is lost next year. You don't know. Now you're facing the same similar dilemma that your Thanksgiving soft. And you go back and say, what did we do last year? I don't know. Oh, let's look at the campaigns. Well, they built some of these people. Why would they do that? You lose the continuity. You lose the detail of the process of your thoughts in it. Oftentimes, you're in such a rush to create ad campaigns. It's about just getting it out there. Hey, I got this thing that, we had a hole in our group block that fell out 4 weeks from now. We lost 60% of our occupancy 4 weeks from now over a weekend. What are our options? Revenue management says, we can lower rate, try to capture any still pending demand to market. And of course, they're going to say, well, that also means we're going to put money on the table because people that have already booked at our higher rate that we have been asking for because we had that group block in are going to rebook at the lower rate. So we're going to take money out of our pocket for that. How much of that displacement is going to happen? You have to calculate that. And so they turn to marketing. Marketing, what can you do? Well, 4 weeks out, are you offer a promotion or special? Yes. Well, if we do that and we put it out in general public, same thing's going to happen. People that book the higher rate are going to see the offered rate and they're going to put money on the table. So we might be able to expand the demand or to expand the capture of the demand that's still latent for the market, but we won't necessarily generate more money from it. We'll just be increasing occupancy, try to fill that hole that we had for the lost group block. These discussions happen. Whatever the decision process is to address that issue, it's not being recorded. Back when I was a general manager, I remember the first hotel I worked at, and one of the best GMs I ever worked for, told me, he says, here's a notebook. And it was just a little full, ring binder notebook. He says, write down your day. What? What do you mean? Write down your day. What were your decisions? And if you can, just kind of briefly jot why you made that choice. What was in your head about why you thought the way you did? I thought that was an annoying request of me. I'm like, why? I mean, am I going to give this back to you? Nope. This is yours. Well, I don't want it. I don't want to have a journal. I don't want to do any of this kind of thing. Of course, I didn't tell him that because he was the GM and I was the food and beverage director. But I did it begrudgingly. Strangely enough, with Avatar just coming out, Way of Water, it reminds us back at the old first original Avatar, and where Sully was asked to record his thoughts for the day, kind of thing, and he was like, "What is this? What?" I felt just like that, in the sense of, why am I doing this? I did it begrudgingly in the sense of worked hard, or I started writing things that I thought were supposed to be in the book. Worked hard, or crazy this or this, and then I began to understand why I was being asked to do these journals. Was to begin to talk to myself about why I was doing what I was doing. The Why did I cut that person's hours back because of what? Well, I cut John's hours back because once again he came in late, smelling of alcohol. Can't trust him that when I really am going to be in a place I can't substitute him, that I can bring in somebody else. Remember, this is journals to me. This isn't shared to somebody else. And we're back in the world of HR. It's like, ooh, that's dangerous stuff. You got to figure how many years back this was. The other was beginning to say, answering to questions of why we strategize what we're doing, our thoughts on how we created banquet setups, my decision tree on pricing models, and how much margin I think I was calculated from food group types based on numbers of people, and where I started beginning to learn the math correlations of how much does it cost versus how many people, where's the break even and where's the loss leader, where's the regression analysis on it, things that I didn't really think about. I started writing notes to myself. The benefit of it, other than the fun of listening to what was in my younger head back then, as I look back on these things, and I did keep them, was the ability to begin to look at what I was thinking about. And of course, in my journals, I would also write what other people's comments were as well. Their feedback to me about situations that we're in at the time. I began to learn from what I was doing in a historical way. I started looking back year over year to what I was thinking the year before. Now, there was a naivety to it, of course. I had one more year of experience. I had one more year of events that happened. There was a little bit more anticipation of something recurring like a Thanksgiving, to know what we were going to do because of what we had done the year before and so forth. Those revelations stick in your head. But what was really cool is I began to separate, and this is why I started journaling personally for myself, what I wanted to tell myself, Sophie says, versus what I wanted to keep as a business perspective. What is shareable? This was what we thought. This is what we did. That habit carried over in a very positive way when I was going from running hotels. Well, first off, from food and beverage to running hotels to being asked to be corporate, and then running multiple hotels. I kept track of what I was thinking and doing as I was doing it for rationale reasons, so that literally, when I sat down with a particular property and I had reviewed what I was thinking of doing with them, what we had done with them, my feedback of what I thought we were doing from conversations or what have you, when I sat down with them, it was a flip open. It's like a doctor's office that keeps their notes from the last visit you had. It's a chance to get back up to speed what I was mentally in my mindset of. And of course, with the distance of time from when I wrote the notes to where I'm reading them now, the added insight of saying, well, that really didn't work out the way we thought. That's pretty much what we did happen the way we thought it was going to happen. This was something that was a problem back then. Let me make sure that that's been corrected for. It allowed me to be at speed. The transition in my relationships with the hotels was profound. One is that they felt really kept in touch with. That when I spoke with them, the details that they remember, because I was of a position above them, so it was a bigger deal for them to talk to me than it was for me to talk to them in one of many. And I know it sounds odd, but that's the way the tier system kind of functions. When you talk to your boss, you're more attuned to what they're saying compared to talking to people that are subordinate in structure, that you tend to be more of a engagement of I'm leading the conversation and you're listening to it kind of thing. That's a very general term, but in that sense. And so because of that, the relationships grew better. But what I also began to find as we were doing marketing from a corporate level is, and this is, if you do Google Ads, there's notes When you build a campaign, you actually write notes. When you do Google tag managers and tracking, there's a section for notes. What was this for? Why are you doing this? What is the intent of this? If you begin to paraphrase a standard answer series that you have to generate, because sometimes you just look at a blank sheet, it's a blank sheet. What am I going to say about this? So I'm building a tag to go over and track number of clicks on a book now button on page 3 of the accommodations under double doubles. Yeah. It sounds like, why do I even have to record it? Because if you have a structure, the who, what, where, why, basic structure, then you have a place to go back to. But more importantly, you have somebody else to go back and look at what you were thinking. So now, taking that Thanksgiving story a little bit, last year we had this situation. And remember last show, we talked about the 2 problems that you go solve problems in pairs. The problem that's immediately in front of you and the recurrence potential of that problem, to learn how to not have this happen again in a way because you've learned from solving this problem in front of you. This goes to the same conversation tone. You're doing this by keeping a record of how and what you were thinking of back then. It doesn't mean you made the right decision. You recorded what your decision was going to be based on what you thought was the reasons for making the decision. If you look at that and going, wow, were we wrong? We totally misread this or whatever. That in itself is a revelation of learning, because you're going back and looking at what you recorded and realize, I understand why I thought that way, because heck, I was there, I thought it, but it didn't work out that way. It didn't look that way, or it ended up being what we looked at it that way. And it was completely off. And we missed this whole thing over here. That aggregation of data, the old adage, if you don't record history or no history, it's destined to repeat itself, is very true. Companies do it to themselves because they don't have this continuity of recording what it is they were doing to make the decisions that they did, so that the next generation people sitting in that chair can look at the people ahead of them and say, well, that makes sense, or wow, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they even think that? Because lessons get learned from history. So looking at that now first explains the old numbers and the old methodologies and the old marketing campaigns that were set up and so forth. But it also helps you clarify, well, is that still valid now? Or is what's wrong with that compared to what we know now? Or, well, we know that we can balance it with this or take some of this, whatever it is, the decision from it, it was learned from the history of recording, journaling what you did. I recommend this for any department. I recommend this for anybody in any position that's responsible to other people and or responsible to those people. So basically everybody. Excuse me, coffee. As a means of continuity, if not for yourself, for the continuity of the person that sits in your chair after you. Knowing what the previous predecessor thought, knowing the rationale, and it doesn't have to get mournfully inside of, well, I was having a bad day emotionally and I was feeling, it's not a personal journal. Believe me, like I said, back in the day, I separated the conversations to myself. Self-I says, this is my personal thoughts. This is my feelings of the day. This is what, and not every day did I do something, because it was not anything of that particular day that I wanted to make sure that I talked to myself about. Okay. But the business journal of it was persistent. And what's fun is I used to, and this goes before smartphones, before PDAs, anything like this, was a little ring binder notebook that was always in my back pocket. And I always scrunched the little ring binder. It was one of those little like news reporter notebooks. That lived with me. Matter of fact, I can attest to my wife's getting me into the tech geeky that I am today, because she bought me a voice recorder back in the day as an upgrade from my little notepads, so I could remind myself. Because as I'm walking in the back hallways as a food and beverage director, it's like, oh yeah, let's make sure we get the dusting done, high top dusting done, and such and such, such, such. And I would accumulate these notes, and at the end of the day, I would put them into action if they needed to be, or just to move them to my journal. It was an observation I had about something. Have a cool idea about taking a cable spool and making it into a table for the banquet idea that we have of such and such. It's not an actionable thing. It's a thing that I don't want to forget. And so I put in the journal saying, hey, ideas associated with banquet ideas, taking those extra spools and making them tables, blah, blah, blah. Got to talk to engineering about making bases or whatever. It is a really neat way of keeping track of things. It's like a to-do in combination to a historical accountability. And you can look back, and I kept these notes I'm looking at. Like, first off, my handwriting was way better back then. It's gotten worse. 2, I began to see my shorthand develop. At first, it was like, Dear Diary. And then after that, it turned into X and Y. And it was very functional, because the more and more you realized how you relied on these notes, the more and more you want to put in the notes. You knew how well you could learn your lessons from the history of what you were doing. So I began to learn how to record why I thought we were building a marketing campaign, why I thought a particular campaign should do, and what I was thinking about how I was building the reporting. Whatever it is, I got very specific. The more specificity I got, the more it would clarify my memory of what it was I was thinking at the time I was writing the note. It helps in self improvement because you're looking at your logic back then versus your logic now. That's the personal value. The value to the business is that if I'm sitting in somebody else's chair and they went through the exercise of keeping a journal of what they've done, I can flip it open and look back to before a particular event that I'm now facing. Thanksgiving is our example of the day, and see what they were thinking, what he or she was thinking, what processes they were going through, what was their reaction to what they thought they were going to do. And I have the benefit of looking at the actual historical numbers and see if they were successful or not successful. Like, well, I don't know why they'd be chasing that demographic down, but let's see, did they improve their business? Nope, didn't. So that was not what they thought it was going to be. That insight is incredible. And also, from an investment of a company to solicit this with their people is valuable beyond dollars when it comes to the continuity of how the hotel runs. We talk about people that are docents, people that keep record of the history of things. I have the privilege of knowing friends of mine, dear friends of mine, from my college days at Eckerd College, the waterfront program, the Eckerd College Search and Rescue program. And so many things happened in my life in college there, as did everybody else in my time there. But that is over the generation of 50 plus years. And keeping the continuity of remembering all the detail, the pictures of people that we don't remember, the events that happened that are fuzzy as to even which year they were in, or sometimes even which decade sometimes, is challenging. That history that's lost is really lost. I mean, it's a lost feeling. That translated to business translates to money. When you lose the history of the place, like I was fascinated that there, for a brief period of time, one of the hotels I took over as GM, that there was somebody at the hotel that really was into photography. And they took pictures of the hotel and its construction, and for a short duration afterwards while they were at the hotel. Nobody else had pictures like this. Now, yes, there's a newspaper picture of the hotel when it was built with the owner in front of it with the ribbon going, like this. Yeah, okay. That's great for the owner. He has that on his wall, I'm sure. But the back of the house, the restaurant the way it first looked, the lobby the way it first looked, the first opening teams beaming smiles beyond the front desk like they're ready to conquer the world. That magic of history was fascinating to me when I took over the hotel. Because one, it added me a depth of it just not being a brick and mortar building surrounded by people that were punching time cards. It was a place that was built for a purpose. It was a place that that was a part of their lives. There was people that had passion and people that had interest, and there was excitement and what have you, and they were proud of what they had and all those things. But it really was fun to see what the place looked like. Why? I remember in very particular a hotel that was based on Italian themes. It was the Melbourne Hilton. And they had the Rialto room, and everything was based off of Venice. And there was some structural things in this restaurant that just bugged the bejeebers out of me as to why do we have the second elevation, and why is this half rail the way it is, and what are these depressions that I have to keep painting over? So until I looked at the old pictures, I'm like, oh my God, they had this rail, this piazza rail here, and this used to be a garden draping. And you're looking at it going, wow, this is crazy. And that's why I found these hooks in the ceiling that I didn't know were for, buried behind painting and drywall that was put up, and weird things. It gave such a context and texture to the place, seeing the history. The same goes through with journaling. The journaling gives you depth of understanding of the history of the hotel. One hotel that I was, when I was in corporate life, the market around it changed. It was a beautiful Hilton around what was a large commercial area. So they had banquet rooms for corporate events. They had a lot of corporate travel. It was a great hotel for it until the market around them changed, and that turned into residential. So the layout of the hotel wasn't as functional. It was a lot of wasted space because there was no reason for people to have these events there anymore, because it was away from where the interest was. And so going through the old history of the hotel, going through the old marketing of the hotel, going through the old pictures of the hotel gave us a perspective of not just what it was built for, but the potential of what we could do with it in comparison now that the market had changed around it. This depth of knowledge would not have existed if the people before us didn't keep some record of it. That's where the journaling becomes so critical to solving your future problems. Because here, in a very minor sense, going back to our Thanksgiving example, put us back in the middle of October, and revenue management with all of our newfangled tools and trips and everything else, tricks, is forecasting for Thanksgiving that is not good. We're not seeing the business that we were expecting for Thanksgiving. But now, fortunately, it's the beginning of August, and we have a chance to affect these opportunities. So marketing is tasked with what can we do to improve our Thanksgiving. Having historical information about things that have been done in the past that were successful is one of the first resources I would consider. Like, so what has this hotel done, if it has history, before for Thanksgiving? Let's just, what was successful? Was it ever successful? Was it always a downtime and we just keep over forecasting it or whatever? But you get to ask these questions because you go and see in a journal what was done prior to the same event in times past, years past. Obviously, times change, tech changes, interest changes, so forth and so on. Friday night seafood buffets are not as much of a thing as they were 15, 20 years ago. Those things change, but to know that they did those things and what was it that they did, and maybe even pictures that they did, but the journaling is a way of looking at the history to solve your future questions. Because if I had that information about what the previous teams did for Thanksgiving, I could exclude what was unsuccessful, if not repeatable. Like maybe the market did change and where they weren't successful. At least I'd have the choice of looking at saying, okay, well, that wasn't successful for them to target them 3 years ago, but is that audience still around? And is it still, maybe it's grown in value? Okay. Well, let's look at that and see if we can validate the idea of whether or not it's still a bad idea. That kind of journaling happens. I mean, you think about it, Star Trek, being the geek I am, Captain's log. Ship's logs have been a historical factor of life. All of this, of the captain of the vessel wrote down what happened that day. We're on a course of such and such, going to such and such. We're at these levels of provisions, and the weather was this. I've often used, whenever I've run a hotel in the past, I would make people keep a weather log, and they're like, now with computers and history and so forth and so on, you can actually go back and look. What was the weather like in that market that day? That's valuable, but not as valuable as somebody at the front desk having recorded really killed us that between 3 and 7 o'clock, it just deluged out front. And our normal walk-in traffic just didn't happen because it was just so dang inconvenient for them to try to get in the door to even ask us what the rate is. And that was an actual journal entry from a hotel I was running down the Keys. We had massive walk-in traffic. Matter of fact, 48% of our business every day, almost 50%, was walk-in traffic. Did not have a schedule. I mean, you imagine forecasting where the best forecast you have is 50% occupancy all the way to the same day. It drove many revenue managers crazy. They had to face that. But when you begin to realize that there was an ever stream of people coming down A1A, it's going to be one. There's one to get in front of it to the hotel, and that they're going to walk in the door and ask your rate and dates and so forth. And it gave you a sense of confidence that you could accomplish anything because you knew you were going to be able to get that kind of traffic. But the idea of knowing that kind of information as to where business came from, how it came, what was the anticipation, the weather impact on that day, whether it got cold, like our campaign for Winter Snap that we launched because up in our feeder markets in Philadelphia, it got cold and stayed cold, and it's forecasted to stay cold. Winter has set in, and we had a trigger that would send our marketing campaigns up to that market saying, why be cold and freezy when you can be warm and toasty down here, kind of thing. Went off, and we actually gave feedback. The campaigns are working. We're getting lots of calls in from there. We ask them where they're from. They're from Philly. Knowing that started within 24, 48 hours of the campaign launching is valuable as a marketer to say, wow, that trigger works. Now, obviously, technologies and modalities of communication have changed over time, but the basic premises of knowing that kind of information hasn't changed. It still is critical in the planning process, future tense. For my examples of Thanksgiving, thinking back at the beginning of October, planning for what you could do to impact positively Thanksgiving and looking at the historical data of the things that happened time before gives you a baseline, a starting point to consider options. What's capable, what's not capable, what's been done, what has yet to be done, what was successful, what wasn't successful. Those benchmarks, sticks in the sand, whether they're right or wrong, it's a reference point to start from. Going back to my search and rescue analogy, is like whenever you create a search pattern, you have to start somewhere and you have to calculate the most probable place to start. And then you branch out in a pattern from that. The same goes for marketing. You create a premise based on your initial evaluation of historical data and what have you, historical data being journals in addition to historical traffic, and you create a base starting point. Let's start here. We know X, we know Y, we know Z. We don't know A or B or C, and we certainly don't have an end result as to what this would be yet, but at least we have a reference to start from. Validate or deny it, move on from it. Validate or deny it, create variance. Validate or deny the options, variances. That's how you progress in a marketing strategy platform. Source to conclusion, methodology and process. And it comes from having history. And these aren't hard things. It's not like you have to start describing the world in depth and spend hours doing it. I failed at that many times where I was very much about, I got to spend an hour writing my journal stuff. No. Sometimes it was a combination of timing. I would jot something or record something very quick, just a simple statement of something, because I didn't want to forget it or lose it. And then I would, at the end of the day, if I needed to add a couple of things I didn't do that with, like, okay, my end of the day was, this is what it was. We launched this campaign. This was our rationale for it, whatever. I didn't fill it all in because it was the end of my day and I wasn't going to ruin the rest of my day extending the diary discussion. But while it was still in my mind for the next few days, I might go back and embellish the journal. Now that I have a moment here or 15 minutes here or 5 minutes here, go back and say, okay, back when I was talking about my marketing idea was such and such, and this was a plan, it's because of X, because of Y, because of Z. We were thinking this would be what would happen. So I can go back and fill some of it in while it's still fresh in my mind. It's not like what I just did by filling in the journal is what we do without doing a journal. I'll remember that. The problem is, and going back to the beginning of our show today, is because of our level of busyness and because of our need to just first filter getting it off of our plate. Everything is a level 10, or if you want to look at priority 1. I'm terrible at force ranking because I'll go through my task list. Everything's a priority 1. That's why it's on the task list. I got to do that. Yes. And this is just as important as that. And this is just as important as those things. And I never get to really create a descending order. I can't force rank for crap because as I looked at why I recorded what I had to do, it was just as important of all the other stuff I recorded what I had to do. Problem is I got 50 of those things now. There's no way I can do all of them at the priority I said I'm going to do. And even when I try to schedule them forward, like, oh, well, you know what? Let's just dilute it over the next X days. Let me put them on days that I know I need to get that done by. It ends up they all bunch up on the next day or the next day after that. I'm terrible about it. The only way I can sort through these things is to keep how I thought of them in order of what I need to do. I literally create chronological priority. Journaling helps me with that. The idea that in this prioritization of journaling, you're recording to not forget. With what I was saying about how we do things now, always in priority, always at fast pace, always just get it off my table, slap some glue on it rather than fix it or replace it. Okay, kind of mentality. We'll worry about it later. We'll worry about it later is twice the time that you just had missed on spending. Now you spend twice as much time later because it got worse or took twice as much time. But it doesn't get remembered because we as people remember milestones. It's literally in a program for project management. There's Gantt charts and timelines, and there's milestones. These are points in time that either something has to be completed or something's going to happen. And we remember milestones better than we remember progressions. I find it fascinating. I keep track of what I eat every day, weight loss things and stuff over the years. And I've kept it as a habit, even though it's not as important as it was when I first started it. I've been doing it for years. And it's amazing that if I forget to write down the food that day, that the next day, I sometimes struggle with remembering what I ate the day before. One can say it's, short-term memory and so forth, getting old, whatever. But it's because eating isn't as much of a thing, okay, as compared to things that you would remember. And so each day eating is like, well, did I have the gyro sandwich yesterday? Or did I have it the day before? You got to remember. And you can actually go look at this app that I record the food in and stuff and say, oh, no, it wasn't that day because I already recorded that day. Yesterday was the hero. Yes, that's right. That's how blurred our memories are. So I would ask you to defy that if you're in responsibility for marketing, okay, to clarify with detail what you did last Thanksgiving or last Christmas season in detail. Why? What did you do campaign wise? What did you do? What was the purpose of those campaigns? What were the results of those campaigns specific to those campaigns? And don't peek by looking. You can't. And I mean, if you can, wow, that's amazing. But unfortunately, you're not going to be sitting in that chair forever because somebody else is going to sit in your chair, and all of that knowledge goes with you. Having a journal makes it really easy. You get to go back and say, oh, yeah, we did that campaign. We launched it. We did those ad variants. That was great. We did it because of this traffic pattern. Great. And we had this kind of result. Sure. And this was the code we used for it. And this is the results. That's awesome. What can we use about this knowledge now? Do we just rinse, wash, repeat it? Or do we actually expand on it because it was so successful? What did we miss by doing just what we did compared to what we could do now that we know more? That's the cool part of journals is they give you a peek into solving the future because it literally is showing you ways that you solved the past when you didn't know as much, when you didn't see exactly how this was going to turn out. That's why when you deal with statisticians and so forth, they always use data that's like 3-4 years old. And you're like, dude, it's like it's 2022. Why are you using 2018 data? It's because it has been vetted, verified, and basically what's called rock data. It's confirmed. This is the data. There's nothing still questionable about it. It's been affirmed, reconfirmed, and affirmed that this is the data from this. And so now you can use this data to refer to things because there's no variance to this data. It's the reason why in college you have textbooks that are the years back that they are. Because if you talk about current things, they're still not truly set. Are they events? Are they trends? Are they guidelines? Are they rules? There's so many levels of validation that go on in current things that don't mean the same. If I told you 18 months ago that Facebook would be on the downhill, that their stock would be down 70%, and that Twitter would be a shambles of a shoot storm, you'd look at me going, what are you talking about? These are the two mainstay, and that TikTok is the number one social platform. You'd be looking at like, first off, TikTok, what? How many other places have tried to be the scale that Facebook and Twitter are? And what do you mean Twitter would be? I mean, yeah, it's got its problems, but it's still Twitter. People still use to broadcast their perspectives. And Facebook, they've never had a losing month. Every month they've got more people on it than they had the month before. And yet all of those things I just said are true. So from that, you have to learn from the historical lessons that they provide. And that's where journaling comes in. And everybody can do this type of journaling. And it doesn't have to be overly complex, as I said before, or beyond. Because if you add one more thing, like the girl I was talking to at a property that is in the sales office that used to have 5 people and she's the only one, but the numbers went up. This is the straw that breaks the camel's back. This is the bridge too far. Whatever analogy you want to have with it, asking to do these things is one thing too many because it's added on top of a pile rather than solving the pile. When you're working with people, you have to give why this is being done in a way that helps them, not just the requirement of why you need them to do it. They need to see the value to themselves for what you're asking. So by asking them to journal, you have to give some allowance somehow that makes this fit in so that you can get the benefit of why they're doing the journaling. Just like my first GM did for me, where I'm like, well, this is crazy. Why the hell am I going to waste my time talking about what I did for the day when I'm on the day doing it? I know what I did today because tomorrow you might know a little bit less of the day. A week later, you might forget even more of that day. And a month later, you might not remember what you did that day. That's why the journaling is so helpful, especially for marketers, because when you do campaigns, you're in the flow. You're thinking, okay, that data is in my head and I know that impacts this and this. Because of this, we're going to branch out and do these 2 ad tests. And then we're going to go over and create this campaign that's in silhouette to this, but it's going to be mirrored exactly for this demographics. But we're going to change the geo. You're in the groove. You got the flow going. You got to figure out what's going on. Everything's great. And next day, what was I thinking of? I'm notorious for that. I've literally been caught saying, can you say that again? I'm like, say what? Because when I'm talking, sometimes my mind and mouth, as many people know, will go in sync. Sometimes mouth gets ahead of it. But from that, I am thinking about it in what's in my head as I'm doing it. And then when I get broken out of that, the flow of it goes away, I'm looking back. I don't have the same reference points as to why I was saying what I was saying. So I can't remember what I said. That's why I record so much of what I do, is because I actually go back and go, oh, that's what I was thinking. That's why I know that. Memory loss, brain damage, whatever. Yes, probably true. And yes, if you talk to my family, probably very true. But the idea is journaling helps sort the jumble, and it allows you to refer back to the things that were triggers that you wanted to remember because you wrote them down, that bring you back to that moment, just like a photo does. Speaking of the whole Eckerd College and so forth, I was showed a photo of a friend that passed, that was found in the archives, and it just brings you right back, doesn't it? Just like a song or anything like this, that kind of trigger to a memory is powerful. If you wrote the notes, it's like I have with my notes in my journals. It's fun to go back and literally hear your inner voice thinking what you wrote, kind of thing, bring you back to that moment. If you're a person that's reading somebody else's story, other journal things of what they were doing that day, whenever the rain was this or whatever, even by the way they write the information, even if they're answering the same questions, you get a sense of who they were, how they saw things, what were their priorities. You could tell if their team was a priority. You could tell if their business was, you could tell if their career was a priority by literally how they wrote information down. The information is still helpful to you, but it gives you a wonderful history to what you're doing, where you're at, and what you're doing. Because that's a critical component to this, is that you have to want where you're at, want what you're doing, want to work with the people you're with. And journaling gives you a way of chronically keeping track of those thoughts as you go through the process. Well, I spent 40 minutes ranting and raving on a soapbox about the value of journaling. It's up to you to decide the value of journaling for yourself. I think that with all of this transition of this year to next year, the emergence of what we've been doing these past couple of years to what we hope to be doing next year, all the things that will always forever change each year that we do things, New Year's resolutions and all this other stuff, that you consider it. I would give a recommendation that you try journaling, not on some anniversary specific January 1st kind of thing. As we all know, everybody makes weight loss resolutions for the New Year's, and the fitness clubs all advertise about great beginning of the year specials, knowing that if they can get you to sign up for their annuals and so forth, they don't have to worry about you showing into the club after the first 3 or 4 or 5 months. You'll fade, but you still have to pay them each month because you've signed the year contract because you're optimistic that you were going to do it the whole year this time. We have all these New Year's resolutions. We even joke about the fact that every New Year's we have the same resolutions because we didn't do them last year. So I would recommend, if you're going to try something that affects your modality of business, you do it at a random time. I've had great personal success with deciding on weight loss or deciding on changes of behavior or what have you at random times, rather than saying, I'm going to do that on my birthday. I'm going to do it at the end of the month. I'm going to do it at the end of the week. I'm going to do that next year. If you do that, then the expectation, the buildup of I'll put it off until then, makes it harder to start it when you thought you were going to. If you just say, let's start it now. Let's do it now. It's the stand-up desk kind of thing. I just decided I'd flip the conversation of I wasn't using my stand-up desk for a long time. Got sitting more and more and more. And I decided, well, why do I have a stand-up desk? Or actually, my wife reminded me, why do I have a stand-up desk? And I went from when do I want to stand to when do I want to sit? And literally it went from maybe standing 5-10 minutes an hour, if-ish, to maybe now standing 5 or 10 minutes every couple of hours, or sitting every couple of hours. I tend to stand more. I've gotten past the, when I don't like typing when I'm standing, so I'll do most of my typing stuff when I sit. Nope, just get better at standing and typing. These kinds of transitions come from keeping track of what you're thinking, of remembering that you were interested in, or this is what I was doing at the time, or this is what our motivation or process was. From a marketing perspective, it's critical because it gives you a path backwards, not just a path forward. It gives you more than just the data you're working with. It gives you the perception of the data as you were looking at it for the first time. And that lessons learned, not just from yourself being the journal writer, but the lessons learned from whoever did write the journal, are critical to your advancing for future question problem solving. There you go. 45 minutes of soapboxing. I did want to bring a news item up that I thought was interesting because it seems to, like, everybody all of a sudden just woke up and discovered that there's AI content generation out in the world. I find it funny. I know that Tim Peters did a podcast recently. We did one a few months ago about AI generated software. We're going to talk a little bit about, we have talked. We shared tools that did AI content back, I think, show 351 or 349, I think. I can go back and confirm that in the show notes. But the darling of what's going on right now, this is from a Wired article, ChatGPT. People are just having a blast with the fact that they can type in some things, and then this AI machine learning, algorithmic learning, will develop content from that. And it's so natural sounding and neat sounding. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Because one of the greatest challenges to anybody that has to generate content or expand what their thought processes are to longer context, always struggle with the process of writing the multi-paragraph stuff or the process of answering cleanly and succinctly. It's neat in that sense, but as we talked about in the live show when we covered AI content, the balancing of interpreting the content that's generated is even more valuable than the content that AI provides to you. What I mean by this is this: AI is not learning to be human. AI is learning the value of statistics of what humans use. The phraseology, the images, everything is fed. The content, and the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. The content that is used for the AI to function, okay, AI, artificial intelligence, which to me is like HAL in 2001: Space Odyssey, is only as good as the content you're putting into it. So if somebody is biased in the content that they're providing the AI to use, that same biasness will come into the content generation from AI. I also mean that from a statistical point of view. If even you say free ranging, it has opportunity to look at multiple sources. Say somebody says, I'm not putting the content in, I'm making sure that it has access to all content. As we know from social media, there is bias in content. If you get on a channel that echoes your political sentiment, the algorithms of social media and so forth will continue to feed you other channels that also share your interest and sentiment to it. But also, that content in there is affirmational and persistent and repetitive. It doesn't say anything about being accurate. It just has it there. And through the sheer quantity of repetitiveness, statistical value that then gets used in the AI's resulting content that it develops. So if you give it access to all this data and you're asking about topics that have polarity to them, you're going to get polarity content developed from the AI. You're going to get untruth. You're not going to get accuracy. You're going to get statistical relevance content in the content that's being generated. So it can carry bias. It can carry data that's not true or accurate. Just because it saw a frequency of the usage of the data means that it sees it as usable. It's not there to fact check and to make sure that what is being shared in the content it generates is accurate. It's only there to look at the content that you're asking to generate around a topic or interest as it finds statistically relevant content that's associated with it. So it can generate the full biasness of content with a nice little wrap and a bow around it. The joke from Fishbone, who makes these cartoons and so forth about business, has his typical characters saying, our AI generated content is having huge results, great interaction. And the person that they're talking to is like, great. And then what's the problem? It says, with other AI generated reading content, the AI bots that are reading it. Truly and honestly, think about this. If AI is generating the content, it's basing it on statistical value and quantity to make the content. Accuracy and truth not being a part of that. It can be accurate and truthful because that's the amount of content it can share, but it doesn't. That's not a qualifier for it. Bots that read content to determine prioritization, categorization, and authenticity and SEO value see the content the same way. They see statistical relevance, volume, consistency, not accuracy, according to the volume of the data being used. So literally, it's feeding itself. What's being generated is being highly ranked because it sees itself. Is this a loophole in Google? No. But because their AI is way more advanced than the AIs that we're seeing in ChatGPT and so forth and so on. Not that it eventually could be a problem. It's just right now it's not, because you can't spoof the system. You can't put white letters on a white background from 25 years ago and get better SEO rankings because of the multiplicities of use of the word. You can't create AI generated content with statistical relevant data and have a bot that categorizes SEO authority reading that same content with the same statistical parameters and high rank it simply because it fit the criteria. Can it happen in some ways? It can happen from human perception. It can happen that you read this content and think that the content is valid for the content that's being shared when it isn't necessarily truthful. That's the danger of these platforms, which is why when we talked in our show about the content for AI, the AI content generators, is that it's a catalyst for expanding content. You can take, and the tools that we were sharing back in the time, we're talking about this. If you give it this content and you give references to where you think the content would be relevant from, it'll generate content for you. But then you stop, go through for accuracy and truth, and go through of voice. This is the critical component right now for how things like ChatGPT and so forth are comparing is, does the voice match what you want as the voice of your product? A lot of people forget the nuance of voice, of how it sounds from what they perceive as you, your corporate entity, or the person controlling the communication for the entity sounds. If it's third person, first person possessive, authoritative, these are all aspects of the content. Now, right now, it's still relatively readable content generation that you can tell that for the most part, it looks like it's generated. Not always, it's getting better, which is where ChatGPT's buzz is going on right now. But it's still kind of like the fake deepfake videos that you can put. I can put a person and literally create a face of a person, upper body and everything, age, gender, skin tone, hair, eyes, color, all this kind of stuff, and literally make them talk to the words that I've typed or AI is generated. And it looks cute, but you can also begin to look at them. Yeah, no, that's not a real person. You still see that variance. The problem is that is quickly going away. That in the next, a year, 2 more years, we're going to have some very good. We've seen some deepfakes that are being done by higher end processing companies that take actors and put them in on movies that they were never in. And it's getting harder. There's apps on phones now you can use, like Reface and so forth, that you put a chosen face that you want on the face of whatever they're offering as a video character. And it's, famous movies and everything else like this. It's happening now, and it's only going to get better at what it does. These are the things that I worry about with ChatGPT, is that laziness is going to creep in. Verifying the data, verifying the voice are going to get shortcutted to getting more out there, because the results are improving their business, because they're flooding out the market with tons of content, which is going to create inherently its own white noise, which inherently means that it's going to be less effective until the next generation of whatever is better comes out and pushes back against that with another way of doing it. That's the problem that I have with this. I'm not against ChatGPT. I'm not against any AI generated content, with the caveat being that it is monitored and reviewed for truth, authenticity, and voice. If it passes that criteria and it's manually by a human reviewed, that reflects the business and everything else, then I'm all for it, because it is a great shortcut. That's why we were talking about it months ago with the platforms that we were talking about. It's a great shortcut. It's great for writer's block. It's great for lots of stuff. Plus, it's also great to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the research stuff, where it can look for SEO authenticated content and use that content in such a way that it optimizes your SEO, search engine optimization, for those. Just I want to throw acronyms out that people may not be familiar with. So that's my thought on it. Article for Wired. I'll put the link into the show notes so you can go see your own discussion with it. Once again, thank you for all those that watch us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, on all the channels and pages we do on all of those, but also, more importantly, those that watch us on our TV channel, Hospitality Channel, which you can get on Roku, Google, Amazon, or Apple. Just look for the Hospitality Channel. The live show is always on the free side of that, along with software and services. We do have a lot of paid, good content behind the paywall for it. And of course, if you want to, and you're in the business doing hospitality marketing, and this is not where you're learning hospitality marketing, it's like from a basic level, you doing it, but you want to have peers that work with or advanced conversations about it, you can join our Hospitality Marketing Club at hospitalitymarketing.club. It's a little email box, fill it in. I'll send you a quiz. If you pass the quiz 90%, 9 out of the 10 questions, basically, then we'll send you an invite to join our closed community group of other fellow hospitality marketers, where we talk about advanced marketing. Modalities, functions, fixes, things like this. We have webinars, seminars, and all the fun stuff on the back of the house. So we talk about function and form and tools and all that. This is not to learn basic. This is not to get certified at something, unless you want to go Google certification or anything like this. But they do a better job teaching Google, and Facebook teaching Facebook. But the idea is that we are constantly evolving on the new processes, like AI, content generation. But you have peers that are already at that speed or above. So you get to ask good questions and get good answers, not what is PPC and what is meta search. It's like, that's for basic training. Go find that somewhere else. There's lots of people that do that stuff. We're on the advanced side. So if you're interested in joining us, hospitalitymarketing.club, there is no cost for it at this time. Eventually, as the community begins to solidify and we feel like it's a value proposition for all those on it, we'll reevaluate it. Obviously, those that are legacied in don't have to worry about it. So it's a carrot on a stick for you. But the reason why I bring it up for the TV channel is that as a part of the club, you get access for free the content on the paid wall of the TV channel. So you get access to the content that we have on the TV channel behind the paywall by just being part of our club. So with that, for those that do watch us in a recorded fashion, we always recast the show 11:30 a.m. Eastern. 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays, Sydney Australian time, and 11:30 a.m. London EU time. So that it's a little more familiar time zone. Although we have people live now watching us from around the world, 39 countries and counting, at strange odd hours. And we thank you so much for the dedication of getting up to watch us live. But for those that listen to or listen to our recording, also we do a podcast right after this. It recaps a little bit of the live show, plus offers and talks about specific tools, functions of tools, usages of tools, and we usually try to parallel them symbiotically with our topic today. And today is no exception. Podcast 383 is literally about journaling tools. What tools are out there, which ones work, and how to build your own if you want to just use some sort of like Google Sheets or what have you format, OneNote or Word or whatever, and what kind of format do you want to create that in so that you simply fill in where you want to fill in when you have the journal entries to do. So there you go. Thank you very much for the privilege of your time. My name is Loren Gray, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.